All right, guys, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about the ethics of using corrections. Now, I have a bunch of videos on this topic when I talk about training tools. I talk about the remote collar. Um, and, I have a bunch of posts on this topic as well. And even a few episodes ago, I talked about the quadrants in which I talk about negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. So if you want to kind of get a little bit more detail on that, go back to that episode. But in this particular episode, I'm going to dive a little bit more into the ethics of using the proper amount of correction. And why ethics get involved here is because I have seen very terrible things done to dogs in the name of training. I'm not the only one. I know some of you guys probably have too. And, maybe my definition of horrible things and somebody else's definition of that sometimes can change, right? To some people, it's pretty extreme. To some people, putting a training collar on a dog, putting a prong collar on a dog is inhumane. And for some people, they have a different tolerance level to what they consider grotesque, inhumane. And I'm just going to kind of tell you some of the stuff I saw that would indicate to me that what was done was, in my opinion at least, unethical and inhumane. So, corrections are corrections. Okay, you might feel a certain way about corrections and the administering of corrections, the use of corrections. Although, if this is not the first episode you've listened to, you're probably okay with corrections. If you follow me on social media, you're probably more open-minded with the use of training tools. I'm not a crank and yanker by any means. I'm not a pro prong collar, pro e-collar. I'm just a pro whatever works for the dog. So here are some of the things that I have seen in the past. And I'm not going to give details and persecute anybody and say any names. This is stuff that I learned this is stuff that I saw in my journey, in my career. And when I first saw some of these things, I immediately thought that can't be right. And then as I progressed, as I got better, I definitely knew, that can't be right. I know that's definitely not right. So, some of the things I have seen, I've seen your standard hanging of the dog when the dog was engaging in something that wasn't even that bad. Things like, the dog is just maybe getting a little bit too, not even crazy, but dog's maybe getting a little bit too amped up, right? Maybe dog is a little bit too hyperactive, and so rather than address that appropriately, I've seen trainers and or handlers go, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna just bring the leash up, suspend the dog, off the ground, and just kind of bring it down, right? Now you might go, well, that's horrible, and you might also go, that's not that bad. So I've just only gotten started. Some of the other things I have seen too is I have seen helicopters. And what a helicopter is when the dog is on a leash, attached to a leash, whether it's a prong collar or a choke chain. And I've seen this done on a choke chain, where the infraction wasn't even warrant this type of correction. I mean, if you even want to call it a correction, I would definitely go ahead and say this is not really even a correction. But I've seen helicopter and dog completely in the air, just doing a complete 360 at least once. I mean, like at least one turn. And I have seen this. I've seen this like probably a couple of times that were pretty bad. I have seen like from one side to the other, the dog suspended for a little bit. But I've also seen like at least a whole turn, 2 turns on one occasion. Again, in the name of training. Another thing I have seen is I've also seen kicking. I've seen kicking of the dog. That is one that is a little bit more common. I have seen kicking a lot more often, and I have heard of people that kick their dogs as part of training. This is more of you could call it an old school technique, and I suppose it is a technique, and it was more common and more accepted in a different time frame. But obviously now we don't do this. Not that we don't do this as much. I'm sure it still gets done pretty often. But what I meant is maybe it's not as acceptable today as it was at some point, some time ago, decades ago. But I have seen that, and even when I was new and fairly new, like by that I mean like 2 years in, a year in, when I did see that, I thought I knew immediately that just couldn't be right. And whenever I was talking to one of my buddies earlier after club, and we were talking about this, and we were saying that I guess when you do this like day in and day out, and this just becomes like a dog training suddenly becomes just a series of motions that you do on a daily basis, and you start to kind of separate yourself. At some point, I think some people just separate themselves a little bit too much, to the point that it becomes too mechanical, and they kind of lose their humanity a little bit. I've seen people that when they engaged in corrections like this, there was like no feeling of remorse. It wasn't like any concern afterwards. There have been times where I've given corrections, and I felt like the correction was maybe a little bit more than I thought it would be. Not even that bad, but even just thinking, I think that correction was a little bit too much, I immediately have this feeling of I should have paid attention to that. And the dog looks fine, because it's still, I'm not going over the top. But and those occasional times in which sometimes the correction is a little bit too much than it should have been, I instantly feel a little bit of remorse, a little bit of I should have done better with that correction. But with some of these corrections that I have witnessed that definitely cross that line of unethical, when I saw those people, there was like no remorse at all. One guy that I worked with, this was a long time ago. One guy that I worked with, the dog didn't even do anything terrible. It was a lab. I remember that. It was a lab. And it was during a scent detection exercise. There was the trainer. This trainer was handling the dog, and I think what happened was the dog was maybe a little bit distracted, just wasn't really into it. I don't remember the dog exactly. It could have been that, maybe it wasn't the right candidate. But I do remember that it wasn't as focused on the task. And so rather than making the exercise easier, simpler for this dog to handle, or just putting the dog away and realizing that this is just not the right dog, I remember the guy kind of lost his patience, hung the dog, and I'm still fairly new at this. So I'm not, I'm not in any position of authority at all here. I'm just kind of watching this being done. And the guy just pretty much hung the dog, and the dog passed out. Dog just hit the ground, and there was like no feeling of remorse. The guy was just thinking, he's probably gonna get up soon. And yeah, I mean, at some point you have to realize that you can't really lose your humanity. And I think maybe that's what happens sometimes. I was telling some people about this last week, or really this past weekend, when I was given a lecture. The people that do this type of stuff, they're really in two categories. The one category are people that truly don't know a better way. I mean, these are the people that are probably kind of new. They're learning, or they were taught to do it a certain way. And I mean, if you look at, for instance, farmers, ranchers, they'll do things to their animals, and it's just everyday, it's just business as usual. Just another day at the office. Some of the things that these ranchers do to their, to their goats, to their cattle, to their pigs, they're just farm animals, and they're very matter of fact about some of the things that they do, and they don't look at it as, I wonder how much discomfort this is going to bring to this farm animal. They just get it done. And I believe there are people like that who work with dogs too. They probably go, this is just how we do it. This is just how you do it with a dog. This is, this makes sense to me. Why not do it that way? It's just an animal. You just got to get it done. And so I believe there are people that are probably good people, genuinely good people, but do this, and they're just more of this is just how we do it. This is the only way I know how to do it, and so therefore it's got to be the only way to do it. I've met people like that were very matter of fact about it, and the things that they would do, like it was like from this one thing, immediate kick right on the dog's back, the dog's ribs, and very matter of fact, and these were people that I knew learned it this way. And it's truly like matter of fact. And I've also seen people on a kind of a different category, and what these people are people that do know better. People that do know that there is a better way to do it, but don't really care to know or learn those ways. And I guess both groups of people that do these types of corrections, if we can call them that, I mean, both of them are definitely people that need more knowledge. It's people that need to really reconsider how they're doing things. Both of these people are, shall we say, wrong. But I believe the group of people that knows there is a better way, they know that they could get better, but they choose to just keep doing it this way because to them it's just easier. I think that's probably the shittier group of people. like the people that I have met, that I have known, who, they learned it that way. Eventually they keep learning, and they realize this is not how I'm supposed to do it. One great example is Mike DeBruzzo from K91. This guy is in New York. He's an awesome trainer, great, very knowledgeable, put out really awesome content. If you haven't heard of him, look up Mike DeBruzzo from K91. He's got an awesome YouTube channel with a lot of content, very detailed information. I always like to give him a shout out when I can, because the guy has been a good influence on me as well. But one of the things that he says on one of his videos, he's what you would call a balance trainer, but he's more on the I don't want to say softer side, but I guess for simplicity's sake, yes, he's more on the softer side. Like he's more on the erring on the side of caution, where he does use corrections, he does use training tools, but he's more on the more I guess that would be the easiest way to describe it, on the softer side. And just, again, very knowledgeable. But one of the things that he says in one of his videos is, when he first got started, he was one of those guys. And, that video was very... It was certainly a good video, because he was very transparent about his journey. He talked about how when he got started, he had this apprentice, or this intern that was watching him, that was kind of learning along with him. Not along with him, but he was in the authority position. He was the trainer. He had an intern, and he's basically working with this dog, and he's hanging the dog, like actually hanging the dog. And so the apprentice asked him, why are you doing that, or is there a different way, something along those lines. And Mike said, this is just how we do it. And he had a realization at that point that that wasn't right. But he is one of those people, at that point in his life, at least he was one of those people that did that. He was learning. He learned it that way. He explained that on the video too. And so he learned it that way, and he got better. And he got way better, to the point where he is now influencing, and has influenced and taught a lot of people. So yeah, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes the person that you see maybe cranking quite a bit, maybe they truly don't know a better way. But then you see the people that do know there is a better way, but they would just rather not. They just don't care. And I have seen people like that. I've met people like that, and I know there are people like that. They have they're like not progressing anymore. But anyway, so we look at it and we go, okay, so how does this come into the ethics of training? And here's the thing, if you do subscribe to the use of corrections, you have to realize that there will be times that you will overcorrect. There will be occasions in which your correction, your timing will be off. It's just kind of part of the learning process. There will be plenty of times where your corrections won't be enough. That's still part of the learning process. And it is a skill, to give an effective correction that does just enough. That is a skill. Okay? That is definitely a skill. It does come with time, It does mean that along the way, you're going to potentially mess up, meaning you're going to either not give enough, you're just going to nag, thus building tolerance, or you're just going to go a little bit overboard. And all of that to make you the trainer that if you do subscribe to the use of corrections, right, then learning this skill gets you to the point where your corrections, like 95 or 98% of them end up being just the right correction for most scenarios, most dogs, because you start to pick up on these things. Okay, so it is okay to occasionally, mess up. That's not unethical. Okay, it is something that you will learn to do. Occasionally, you might go overboard. That's not unethical. Given corrections themselves, now I'm talking more a little bit about opinion and school of thought when it comes to this topic. But just corrections themselves, they're just a form of communication. That's not unethical. Now, obviously, if you're the type of person that does not subscribe to corrections, then you're going to think that all corrections are unethical, which is fine. That's your right. You can feel that way. And this means you're probably not really listening to this podcast anyway. But if you find yourself just still constantly pushing, if you find yourself constantly getting physical with the dog, constantly just putting your dog in situations that is going to fail, and the corrections just keep happening, and the dog's demeanor just keeps getting worse, you might want to start asking yourself, which of those two categories do I belong in? Am I the person that I just don't know, but I can get better, and so I'm going to choose to do that? Or am I the type of person that I really don't care? Like, I know it could be done better. I know that there are some things that I could learn, but this works just enough for me, so I don't really care. And then you have to ask yourself, is this ethical? Am I okay with this? Again, your definition and my definition and other people's definition might be entirely different. And if you can live with that and you're okay with that, then, you do whatever you want. But my thing is, for me, my opinion, it should be for the greater good. It should never be overboard. It should be just enough. And it should be to help the dog or to help the client. It should never be to get your frustration out. It should never be to find just a shortcut, because a bunch of things are done that way. And it was during those times that I saw the helicopters. It was during those times that I saw the hanging. It was during those times that I saw the kicking and the slamming against the ground and the hitting with the pipe. All these crazy, crazy things that we don't really want to see, that we're trying to move past, and we're trying to move on away from that type of training. But again, it's just my opinion. It's just how I feel about it. And I just wanted to kind of go over it in this episode. So if you like this episode, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll see you in the next episode.